Are you interested in self-publishing? Because I self-published 5 books from the year 2020 to the year 2024, and they all failed for one very good reason. And to be honest with you, I'm actually grateful that they did. And whenever I tell anybody that, they immediately come back with 3 questions. 1, how was I so prolific? 2, why did they fail? And 3, why are you grateful that they failed? Hi, my name's Rose. I'm founder of Voice to Page, a writing coaching service, and this year I've challenged myself to publish the 12 books of 2026, and I'm vlogging the process so that you can come along with me. I'm going to share all of my writing secrets, tips and tricks, and all of the things that you would normally get in paid course material as I'm going along, and you can see how I'm applying it and how I'm getting stuck with different things. And today we're going to start at the very beginning, which is, according to Maria von Trapp, a very good place to start. How am I such a prolific author? To answer that question, I want to go back to the very beginning. When God created the heavens and the earth, and Rose created her first awful werewolf erotica novel. Now, I write in fantasy romance, I write in romance, and I write in nonfiction, creating craft books for authors on how to write differently. But at the very beginning, this is 2020, so I mean, like so many other people in 2020, the world was full of trauma and my life fell apart. I got very, very sick. I was living abroad with my husband at the time, and I was so sick. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't talk, I couldn't dance, I couldn't do any of the things that I would normally do. So I was reading. I read my entire backlog, all of my to-be-reads, which, if you are a reader, you would know that that is not a small accomplishment. And then I started reading some really, really terrible werewolf erotica. And this was at a time where I was sleeping like 16 hours a day. So the amount of times that I did have awake was quite precious. And I spent an entire day reading this thing, and it was one of those ones where you pay like chapter per chapter. And I got to the end of the day. The story had gone nowhere. I had paid an amount I'm never going to admit, but I suppose in saying that I am kind of admitting it. And the last thing I thought before I woke up was, I could do better than that, before I went to sleep. And then I woke up and I thought, well, what else have I got to do? I can't work. I don't like my life right now. So I started writing. And the reason why I was able to write so prolifically, especially in that beginning stage, was that my bar was like, I think it's probably going to go under the camera, but like, imagine that my hand is underneath the ground. My bar was that low for the writing, because the writing that I just had to be better on had no punctuation whatsoever. All it had was emotional hooks and werewolves. And hey, I could do that. So I did. I wrote my first awful manuscript, and it was the joy that I had in any particular day. And I wanted it to be a cliche because I wanted to escape, and I wanted even then to create this world that somebody else could also just escape into. And then I got to the end of my first manuscript, and I don't like doing things badly. So I sent it off to get professionally edited. And I have to say, the editor that I found at Jericho Writers, she was a saint, an absolute saint, because I've looked back at that manuscript, and to say that it was a dog's breakfast would be kind. To say that it was a dog's breakfast with enough expletives in here that I would probably get like cancelled off YouTube would be closer to the mark. And yet this woman managed to send back a report that did not make me feel as though the writing was bad. Every area of craft that I was lacking in, she suggested free learning materials or a book to read or like a certain aspect of craft to look up. And the way that she managed to deliver it was, I mean, nothing short of miraculous. And from there, I learned so much about actually having a structure, about the sort of journeys that your characters need to go through to really connect to your readers, and rewrote that manuscript. And then I just kept going. I would write, I would send to professional editors, which I now use AI for, and I will go through that in later videos. I still pay for a manuscript assessment, the very last editorial stage, but I'll go through all of that as we're going on in later videos. And getting back to the prolific part, I've never waited for creativity to hit me. If I want to write, I sit down and I start writing. And sometimes the writing is, I have no idea what to write today. In this scene or in this chapter, I kind of want to start covering this particular thing. I want this thing to happen at the end. And then maybe as they're going through it, they can have a conversation about blah, 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 blah. Or if it's a nonfiction book, I said, this is the point that I want to make by the end of this chapter. The reader probably needs to have this hole in their knowledge, which I need to fill. They probably have these assumptions, because those were the assumptions that I had beforehand. And then you just start getting it out. With writing, especially, you can edit anything except a blank page. That's not my quote. I don't know where it comes from, but it is absolutely true. You can edit garbage. All you need is a bit of a scaffold of what to start putting in. And on top of this, see, I studied Chinese medicine for 8 years, and my sister is a clinical neuropsych. I'm fascinated by the brain and the body and the way that things work, and I like adding like little hacks to my routines. So after moving back from Canada and getting back into the daily life, into the daily grind, you've got friends, you've got different work, you've got other things happening, I would start the day with 20 minutes to an hour of writing. That's it. Just start the day with it. Because if you train your brain to be paying attention to a certain thing, your reticular activating system, then it will start looking for more of that thing. So if you start your day with 20 minutes of writing, that's the first thing that you do. This is for fiction, this is for nonfiction, this is for whatever writing you want to do. Then as you go through the day, your subconscious is still processing those questions. It's still looking for information around you and within you to reinforce that thing that you started the day with. And when it's working away in the back there, it wants to close those loops. It wants to finish that chapter. It wants to get back there. So then when you wake up the next day, it is that much easier to start your day with it. It's essentially hacking curiosity. Now, let's move on to that second question. Why the books failed. Now, the books themselves didn't fail. Whenever someone made their way into my first book, they read and bought the entire series, which is a fantastic follow-through, which makes the reason why they failed all the more embarrassing. And that is because I couldn't get over myself. Yep, I sabotaged them. And I did not think that I was. You know, I got professional covers, I got professional editing, I got these reports, and I was working with editors that cost thousands of dollars and took a month minimum for their reports to generate. I was putting in the work. And as soon as they hit the market, I just focused on the next book. I published all of them silently. I didn't even stop to have a celebratory drink when I hit publish. I didn't commemorate it. I didn't give it weight. I wrote with a bar that was below the floor. And remember, the bar that was below the floor was based on writing that was actually making money for people. So I wrote with that bar beneath the floor. And then as soon as I hit published, I looked at your Sarah J. Maas's of the fantasy romance worlds. I looked at the authors that had been prolific for years. And I compared my writing to that. And did not market them. I did not give them a proper launch campaign. I did not act in any way that would actually put my books in front of the readers that would enjoy them. I created these worlds for people to escape into, and then never invited anybody into them. Now, with the availability of social media, with the availability of Amazon ads, with the availability of all of these marketing tools that are actually just there wasn't an excuse other than that I abandoned them. Through the rest of the series, I'm going to show you how not to do that with your books. And talking about them like this in front of a camera, there's one of the easiest ways to do it. You can write a story, you can talk about the story that you're writing and get out in front of the people. Now, the reason why I'm grateful that these books flopped, that they didn't get out in front of the hundreds of thousands of readers that one day they will, is that years down the track from 2020, I separated from my husband. And now I looked at this catalogue of work that had never made me any money, that I knew at its core was good. And I looked at these guys and I said, you need to make me money now. So off I went to my first business conference because I had the product, but I didn't know how to sell the product. And at this conference, I came to the realization of how I had set it all up for failure. And then I took all of the books off the market and decided to relaunch with proper launch campaigns and a social media specialist that hones in on what these particular books actually need. Not only that, but this business conference convinced me that I could maybe start my own coaching business. I know a lot about writing and I loved it and I loved talking about it. And then a lot of the people that I was having conversations with wanted to write in nonfiction, which I hadn't written in yet. I had written articles, I'd written features, but I hadn't written full books. So I started looking at the story psychology behind why some nonfiction books impact people on an identity level, and realized that there was actually quite a simple formula behind that. That also led me to Jung. That also led me to the way that the brain processes fact and information and stories. Now, when your brain pictures something, so when you're conjuring up those pictures, those memories, you're reading, you're actually making pictures and putting yourself in situations, it lights up overlapping neural machinery that lights up when you're actually doing something. So essentially, you're running a shadow simulation of the thing that you're reading. So let's look at those books that I wrote from 2020 onwards that were trauma wrapped up in fantasy romance. Now, especially with fiction, you write from your subconscious. You're writing about characters, but you're creating that. You're bringing that from the depths of the way that you process the world around you. And there was a lot of unprocessed trauma in those books that it brought up and to the surface and then did not resolve. So then anybody reading those books would dive into the world, start picturing that trauma, start picturing those limiting beliefs, and the brain is running shadow simulations of that. It's kind of saying, this is something that I'm doing right now. And then I'd take them into the dark place and not lead them back out of the dark place, which is a very bad author thing to do. The good news is that if you can identify the limiting beliefs, or if Claude or ChatGPT or whatever AI you like to use can identify those limiting beliefs, then you can move your characters through them. So then, I mean, there are larger loops and larger tensions that you want to set up if you're going for a series right approach, but the really grueling things that your character has to go through to get from the person they are at the beginning of the book to the person they are at the end of the book, you can make pictures about that and then close that loop off. So now as I'm re-releasing those books, I am rewriting them. The first book didn't need that much rewriting from a structural perspective, just the closing up of the limiting beliefs. And that one, that's Under the Blood Moon, and that dropped on the 10th of March this year. So that one is already out. Book 2, you're going to hear about, because it's a bridging book between the events in book 1 and the escalation and the fun escalation of book 3 onwards. But just because it's a bridging book doesn't mean it's allowed to not have things happen in it, and it requires more. But that is a different video. So I'm releasing those books every 3 or 4 months. So that's not going to be the bulk of my 12 books of 2026. The other book that is also going to get its own video that I published like 3 weeks ago is Books That Change Minds. So that's the story psychology of why some books impact us on that identity level. And an 8-step method that you can hold up to your writing at any time to see if it has the markers that will impact your audience. This is written specifically with nonfiction books in mind, but fiction authors can absolutely use this for their works as well. And coming later in the year will be one that is specifically tailored for my fiction authors there. Let me know if you're interested in it. And that sums the first episode up. How to trick your brain into being prolific as frick as an author, why the first 5 books that I published failed, and why I was grateful that they did. See you in the next episode. Oh, and if you want other writing tips and tricks, follow my TikTok or Instagram. It's voice to page. Simple, easy. You'll see me there, and I hope to see you there.